Picture this: a young mother in ancient Egypt, gripping the edge of a birthing stool as a midwife murmurs reassuring words, her hands steady despite the absence of sterile tools or pain relief. The air is thick with incense, believed to ward off evil spirits, while crushed herbs steep in hot water nearby, their medicinal properties the only shield against infection. This scene, repeated countless times across millennia, wasn't just about survival, it was humanity's first daring experiment in childbirth innovation. Long before hospitals or anesthesia, our ancestors faced childbirth with nothing but intuition, observation, and sheer ingenuity, and against all odds, they thrived. What if I told you that some of the most groundbreaking techniques in modern obstetrics have roots stretching back to these ancient practices? From the meticulous records of Egyptian physicians to the sacred rituals of Greek midwives, early civilizations developed methods so effective they'd astonish even today's medical professionals. Take the Ebers Papyrus, a 3,000-year-old Egyptian text prescribing honey for wound care, a remedy now proven to have antibacterial properties. Or consider Soranus of Ephesus, a Roman-era doctor who wrote detailed instructions on fetal positioning, techniques still echoed in delivery rooms today. These weren't just lucky guesses. They were the result of careful observation, passed down through generations like precious heirlooms. But here's the real mystery. How did these ancient innovators, without microscopes or clinical trials, unlock secrets that would take modern science centuries to rediscover? The answer lies in a forgotten legacy of resilience, a testament to human adaptability in the face of unimaginable challenges. This video is your passport to that hidden world. Together, we'll unravel the threads connecting ancient midwives to modern medicine, revealing how their wisdom shaped the very fabric of healthcare. By the time we're done, you'll never look at history or childbirth the same way again. Ready to uncover the extraordinary secrets of antiquity? Let's begin. Imagine a world where every birth was a gamble with death, where women faced labor without pain relief, sterile conditions, or emergency interventions. This was reality for our earliest ancestors. Archaeological evidence paints a sobering picture. Skeletal remains from prehistoric times show shockingly high rates of maternal and infant mortality. A Neolithic grave in Germany, for instance, holds the remains of a young mother and her newborn, their bones telling a silent story of a childbirth that went tragically wrong. Yet even in these desperate circumstances, humanity refused to surrender to fate. The first glimmers of childbirth innovation emerged from simple observation. Early humans noticed that squatting widened the pelvis, making delivery easier, a discovery immortalized in cave paintings from France to Tanzania, where stick-figure women are depicted crouching during labor. This wasn't just artistry, it was a survival manual etched in stone. Communities began crafting primitive birthing stools from logs or stones, mimicking the body's natural alignment. Meanwhile, trial and error revealed the power of plants. Midwives chewed willow bark, nature's aspirin, to ease pain, while yarrow leaves staunched bleeding. These weren't random experiments. They were the first chapters in a sprawling medical textbook written by necessity. But the real breakthrough came when knowledge stopped being accidental and started being shared. In ancient Mesopotamia, midwives passed techniques down through generations like sacred incantations. Clay tablets from 4,000 years ago describe using date wine to dull labor pains, a practice modern science would later validate as alcohol relaxes muscles. Even more striking, the earliest known medical text, the Kahan Gynecological Papyrus from Egypt circa 1800 BC, details remedies for complications like retained placentas, proving these weren't just folk traditions but systematic attempts to master childbirth's dangers. What's truly humbling is realizing how much these ancient practitioners got right with so little. When archaeologists unearthed a Bronze Age burial in Cyprus, they found a mother and child surrounded by seashells arranged in spirals, a ritual likely meant to invoke protection during birth. Today, we understand the spiral symbolizes the cyclical nature of life, but for them, it was pure intuition. That's the untold story of early childbirth, a dance between desperation and brilliance, where every survival was a victory carved into humanity's bones. And this was only the beginning. The Egyptians didn't just practice medicine, they wrote the first instruction manual for it. Picture a scribe hunched over a papyrus scroll, carefully inking remedies for childbirth complications that still plague mothers today. The Kahan Gynecological Papyrus, dating back to 1800 BC, reads like a modern medical textbook, prescribing everything from contraceptives made of acacia gum, a substance now known to have spermicidal properties, to fumigation techniques using herbs to ease labor pains. Even their use of honey to dress wounds, detailed in the Ebers Papyrus, wasn't mere folklore. Modern studies confirm its antibacterial power, validating what these ancient healers observed millennia ago. But what's truly staggering is how they balanced superstition with startlingly practical science. Take crocodile dung, often dismissed as a bizarre ancient remedy. While it sounds outrageous today, its use as a pessary, a device to support the womb, hints at an early grasp of biomechanics. Mixed with sour milk, it formed a primitive pH balancer, creating an environment hostile to infections. And then there were dates, not just as food but as medicine. Egyptian midwives fed them to laboring women, a practice modern research supports. Dates are packed with nutrients that stimulate contractions and reduce bleeding. This wasn't magic, it was trial and error refined into tradition. Midwives in ancient Egypt were more than caregivers, they were the era's obstetricians, wielding tools like woven linen for perineal support, a technique still used in modified forms today. Their understanding of anatomy, though limited by their inability to dissect human bodies, was pieced together through animal studies and battlefield injuries. They even recognized the dangers of breech births, advising maneuvers to reposition babies in utero, a skill that would take Europe centuries to relearn after the fall of Rome. Perhaps their greatest legacy was their reverence for record-keeping. While other cultures relied on oral traditions, Egyptian physicians documented everything from pulse diagnostics to postpartum care, creating a blueprint for future medicine. When archaeologists deciphered these scrolls, they found not just recipes for potions but the birth of empirical science, a system where observation trumped dogma. It's humbling to realize how much we've rediscovered rather than invented, how often modern medicine has simply caught up to ancient wisdom. While Egypt perfected its medical papyri, Mesopotamia was writing the first prescription for childbirth pain, literally. Picture the cracked clay tablets of Nineveh, etched with cuneiform script not just for royal decrees but for laboring mothers. One tablet from 700 BC details a startlingly modern recipe. Mix opium poppy juice with beer for pain relief, a primitive epidural that soothed both body and mind. Archaeologists found these recipes alongside bronze tools shaped like spoons, early speculums used to examine women after difficult births. But what's truly remarkable is how these innovations traveled. A midwife in Babylon might trade her knowledge for Phoenician glass beads, spreading techniques along caravan routes like medical gossip. the real genius lay in their balance of faith and science. When a mother struggled in labor, Mesopotamian midwives didn't just reach for herbs, they called upon Ninta, the goddess who shaped humanity from clay. Incantations whispered over patients weren't mere superstition, they were psychological warfare against fear, a placebo effect weaponized millennia before clinical trials. Excavations at revealed terracotta figurines of pregnant women, likely used as teaching aids or ritual objects. Some show precise anatomical details, suggesting midwives studied anatomy through art long before dissection was acceptable. Then there were the birthing stools, simple yet revolutionary. Unlike Egypt's stone versions, Mesopotamian designs often incorporated hand grips for leverage, acknowledging the physical toll of labor. Cuneiform tablets from Mari describe postpartum care kits with linen strips, herbal poultices, and even early nipple shields made from reeds. But the most poignant artifact might be a tiny clay model from 2000 BCE, a woman squatting on a stool, flanked by 2 attendants. It's a snapshot of humanity's oldest teamwork, the moment when medicine became collective, not solitary. Trade routes turned these innovations into a network of survival. A midwife in Assyria might swap techniques with a Hittite trader, while Persian physicians adapted Babylonian opium recipes into pain-relieving candies. The evidence lingers in unlikely places, traces of Mesopotamian herbs found in Egyptian tombs, birthing amulets inscribed in multiple languages. This wasn't just cultural exchange, it was the first global medical conference, conducted not in lecture halls but through the quiet heroism of women passing knowledge hand to hand, generation to generation. While Mesopotamia and Egypt relied on a blend of ritual and remedy, ancient Greece staged a revolution, one that would change childbirth forever. Picture the bustling streets of Athens in 400 BC, where midwives no longer whispered prayers to goddesses alone but debated anatomy in the shadow of the Acropolis. This was the birth of rational medicine, where Hippocrates himself declared that difficult labors weren't punishments from the gods but natural problems requiring natural solutions. His writings dismissed centuries of superstition with a single radical idea: disease and childbirth complications had physical causes, not divine ones. At the heart of this shift were women like Agnotis, a trailblazer who disguised herself as a man to study medicine, then risked execution to prove female practitioners were indispensable. Legend says when she revealed her gender to a patient in distress, the court threatened her with death until Athens' women rallied, demanding her release. Her legacy, the first recorded midwifery school, where women learned to measure pelvic openings and recognize hemorrhage symptoms, but their most enduring innovation might have been the earliest forceps, bronze tools shaped like spoons, designed to gently guide stuck infants into the world. Cleanliness, too, became a Greek obsession long before germ theory explained why. Midwives boiled linens, washed hands in vinegar, and even fumigated rooms with sulfur, practices that would have saved countless lives in later plagues. Their secret weapon, observation. Greek physicians meticulously documented everything from fetal positions to postpartum fevers, spotting patterns that turned childbirth from a mystery into a science. A scroll from Kos describes diagnosing breech births by palpating the abdomen, a technique still taught today. Yet the Greeks' greatest contribution wasn't just their tools or techniques, it was their mindset. By insisting that every complication had a logical explanation, they laid the foundation for modern obstetrics. When Rome conquered Greece, it wasn't their armies that endured, it was their medical scrolls copied and carried across empires. Today, every time a doctor checks a fetal heartbeat or sterilizes instruments, they're echoing ideas born in the shadow of the Parthenon. the Greeks didn't just deliver babies, they delivered us into the age of medicine. Rome took childbirth out of the shadows and into the streets literally. While Greece philosophized, Rome engineered. Picture an obstetrics, Rome's answer to the modern obstetrician, marching into a military barracks or a cramped insular apartment, her leather satchel clinking with bronze speculums and vials of silphium, the ancient world's closest thing to birth control. These women weren't just midwives, they were the empire's frontline public health workers, trained in state-sanctioned schools and deployed wherever Rome's sprawling reach demanded order. Their tools, excavated from Pompeii to Hadrian's Wall, reveal a startlingly modern mindset. A 2,000-year-old vaginal speculum, its screw mechanism still functional, proves Rome saw childbirth as a mechanical challenge to be solved with precision. What set Rome apart was its obsession with scalability. While Egyptian papyri catered to elites, Roman obstetrixes standardized care across classes. Army manuals like those of Cornelius Celsus outlined prenatal exercises, walking, vocal drills, even early kedules to strengthen mothers for labor. Birthing chairs carved from marble or wood weren't one-off luxuries but mass-produced tools designed with ergonomic curves to align the pelvis. Archaeologists found nearly identical models from Spain to Syria, suggesting empire-wide quality control. Even their pain management was ruthlessly efficient. Opium for aristocrats, fermented barley wine for the poor, but relief for all. The genius lay in their systems. Obstetrixes kept ledgers tracking maternal outcomes, identifying patterns like the higher survival rates among mothers who ate lentils, a detail modern nutrition science would later credit to folate. They pioneered early versions of rotating shifts, ensuring continuous care during prolonged labors. And when disaster struck, they had protocols: boiled linen for hemorrhage, warm oil baths for stalled contractions, even primitive cesareans performed on dying mothers to salvage infants. Rome's collapse didn't erase these innovations, it scattered them. Medieval European midwives inherited Roman techniques through monastic manuscripts, while Byzantine physicians refined their tools into the first true forceps. Today's prenatal fitness regimens, they echo the Roman belief that childbirth wasn't just endured but prepared for, that bronze speculum gathering dust in a Naples museum. Its design inspired modern gynecological instruments. The obstetrix's greatest legacy wasn't any single tool, but the radical idea that childbirth deserved the full might of an empire's ingenuity. While Rome built birthing chairs and Greece debated anatomy, China's approach to childbirth unfolded like poetry, a delicate dance of energy and balance. Picture a Ming Dynasty midwife pressing gold needles into a laboring mother's lower back, not randomly but along precise meridians where Qi, the body's vital energy, was believed to flow. This wasn't mere tradition. Recent studies suggest acupuncture triggers endorphin release, easing pain just as those ancient practitioners intuited. And then there were the herbs meticulously weighed in bronze scales, dong quai to strengthen contractions, chrysanthemum to calm nerves, even lotus seed porridge to replenish energy after birth, each ingredient chosen not just for its physical effect but for how it harmonized the body's inner landscape. The real revelation lies in China's medical texts, which treated pregnancy as a conversation between mother and child. The Canon of the Pulse, written 2,000 years ago, taught physicians to read fetal health through the mother's wrist, a practice modern Dopplers now echo with ultrasound. But where today's medicine often separates maternal and infant care, Chinese healers saw them as intertwined. A Tang Dynasty scroll prescribes meditation and gentle movement to settle the shen, or spirit, believing a mother's emotional state shaped her baby's constitution. Modern epigenetics would later confirm that stress hormones can cross the placenta, validating what these observers documented centuries ago. What kept these practices alive wasn't superstition but results. When a Ming-era noblewoman suffered prolonged labor, her physicians didn't bleed her like European doctors might. They brewed a soup of astragalus and red dates to boost her chi, then used moxibustion burning mugwort near the skin to stimulate contractions. Skeletons from that period show lower rates of pelvic fractures than in medieval Europe, hinting at gentler techniques. Even postpartum care was revolutionary. Silk bindings supported healing abdominal muscles, while fermented rice wine prevented infection with its natural antibacterial properties. The legacy endures in unexpected places. Today's prenatal yoga, it mirrors the slow, deliberate Qigong exercises Qing dynasty midwives prescribed, the trend of placentophagy. Chinese medicine has used dehydrated placenta in tonics for millennia, but perhaps the greatest testament is this. When archaeologists opened the tomb of a Han Dynasty midwife, they found her buried with her tools, not just needles and herbs, but tiny silver bells to soothe newborns. In that quiet grave lay the heart of Chinese childbirth wisdom, that bringing life into the world required not just skill, but reverence for its sacred balance. In the shaded courtyards of ancient Varanasi, where the scent of turmeric and sandalwood hung thick in the air, midwives practiced childbirth not as a medical emergency, but as a sacred rite of passage. The Sushruta Samhita, a 2,000-year-old Ayurvedic text, reads less like a medical manual and more like a love letter to mothers, prescribing daily oil massages to strengthen fetal muscles, herbal tonics to balance hormones, and even specific melodies to soothe both womb and woman. This wasn't just medicine, it was an ode to the art of gentle birth. Among its most revolutionary ideas, that a child's health began long before their first breath. Prenatal care included everything from dietary guidelines like ghee-rich meals for joint flexibility, to meditation techniques to calm the mother's vata, or nervous energy. Modern science now confirms what Ayurveda intuited. Maternal stress alters fetal development, and nutrients like omega-3s in ghee directly support brain growth. The real magic lay in mama therapy, a precursor to modern acupressure. Midwives mapped 64 vital points on a mother's body, using fingertip pressure to stimulate labor naturally or relieve back pain. One key point, located just above the ankle, was believed to open the birth pathway, a claim that gains new resonance when you learn modern reflexology targets the same area for uterine contractions. Even more striking were the neonatal rituals. Newborns weren't simply wiped clean. They were given abhyanga, warm oil massages mimicking the womb's rhythm, a practice now shown to boost immunity and regulate infant sleep. But Ayurveda's genius extended beyond the physical. The Simantoniana ceremony, celebrated at each trimester, wove spirituality into biology. Families gathered to anoint the mother's hair part with vermilion and yogurt, symbolizing the union of strength and nourishment. Herbs like ashwagandha were tucked into amulets, not just as talismans but as transdermal remedies. Today, we know its adaptogenic properties reduce cortisol. When monsoon winds carried these practices to Southeast Asia via Buddhist monks, they took root in unexpected ways. A 10th century Javanese text describes midwives using coconut oil instead of sesame, while Balinese healers adapted mama points into their own bodywork traditions. The quietest revolution, though, was in Ayurveda's view of pain. Unlike Western medicine's historical focus on enduring suffering, ancient Indian midwives saw discomfort as a sign of imbalance to be eased, not ignored. Herbal sitz baths with neem and turmeric, now proven to reduce perineal tears, were standard postpartum care. When Portuguese colonists reached Goa in the 16th century, they mocked these barbaric practices until local birth outcomes surpassed their own. By the 1800s, British physicians were quietly incorporating Ayurvedic neonatal massage into European nurseries, rebranding it as Swedish massage. Today, when a doula suggests perineal massage during pregnancy or a yoga instructor teaches prenatal breathing techniques, they're channeling a lineage that began not in textbooks, but in the hands of women who treated childbirth as the ultimate act of sacred collaboration. Beneath the sprawling baobab trees of West Africa, generations of mothers leaned into the arms of their sisters, aunts, and grandmothers, their labors accompanied not by sterile machines but by the rhythmic beat of tam-tam drums and the low harmonies of birth songs. This was the original social safety net, a web of knowledge so finely woven that every woman in the village knew how to support a mother in travail. Griots, the keepers of oral history, didn't just recite epic poems. They memorized chants detailing optimal birthing positions, kneeling, squatting, even hanging from a tree branch to let gravity assist. These weren't random suggestions, they were the distilled wisdom of centuries encoded in melody so they'd never be forgotten. Take the ergot-like compounds brewed from the seeds of the African ryegrass, used by herbalists to stimulate contractions. Modern pharmacology would later isolate the same alkaloids to create synthetic oxytocin, the active ingredient in today's pitocin. But where Western medicine saw a chemical to be extracted, African midwives understood the plant's full context, boiling it with ginger to mitigate nausea, administering it only when the moon was high, believing its pull mirrored the body's tides. Science now confirms lunar cycles can influence labor onset, proving these rituals weren't just poetry, but precise observational science disguised as tradition. The real revelation, though, was the birth hut, a sacred space where mothers retreated with their circle of women, away from the distractions of daily life. Unlike the isolation of modern delivery rooms, these huts thrived on collective energy. Older women massaged the laboring mother's back with shea butter warmed over coals, while younger girls fanned her with palm fronds, learning by doing. Postpartum, the community took over completely. Neighbors cooked meals, elders cared for siblings, and the new mother was wrapped in a kanga sling to keep her baby skin to skin for months. The result, astonishingly low rates of postpartum depression in cultures that practice this model, a fact that's prompting modern psychologists to rethink recovery protocols. Perhaps the most profound lesson lies in how these traditions viewed pain. While European medicine often framed contractions as something to endure or silence, African midwives taught women to vocalize, transforming cries into power songs that synchronized with each surge. Archaeologists have uncovered ceramic figurines from the Nok culture showing women in labor surrounded by singers, their mouths open in what's clearly song, not scream. Modern hypnobirthing techniques, with their focus on vocal toning and breath control, are only now catching up to this ancient understanding that pain managed within community becomes bearable, even sacred. When a Maasai midwife in Kenya was asked why her people had no word for epidural, she laughed and pointed to the circle of women around her. "This," she said, "is our pain relief." It's a reminder that the most advanced childbirth innovations aren't always found in laboratories, but in the quiet, fierce love of those who have spent millennia making sure no mother walks the path alone. In the Red Rock Canyons of Navajo country, childbirth wasn't just a physical event, it was a dialogue with the earth itself. Picture a laboring mother sipping tea steeped from blue cohosh, its spiky purple flowers gathered at dawn when their potency was believed to peak. Nearby, a midwife crushed dried raspberry leaves between her palms, releasing a tart fragrance that signaled readiness. This wasn't herbalism as we know it today, but a sacred contract with the land. Modern research would later confirm what these healers already knew. blue cohosh contains cholesaponin to stimulate uterine contractions, while raspberry leaf's fragrine alkaloids tone pelvic muscles. But for the Diné people, these plants were more than medicine. They were relatives offering their strength. The rituals surrounding birth wove the spiritual and physical into one seamless tapestry. Before labor, mothers entered the inika, or sweat lodge, where steam from sacred herbs like sage and juniper cleansed both body and spirit. The heat wasn't just for purification. It mimicked the warmth of the womb, preparing muscles for the work ahead. After birth, the umbilical cord wasn't discarded but buried with ceremony, often beneath a young tree. This wasn't mere symbolism. It rooted the child's life force to ancestral lands, a practice some geneticists now link to improved mental health outcomes when indigenous youth maintain cultural connections. Colonization attempted to sever these bonds violently. Government boarding schools punished children for speaking of birth traditions, while missionaries labeled midwives as witches. By the 1920s, the Indian Health Service had forcibly relocated 90% of Navajo births to hospitals, where mothers faced sterile walls instead of cedar-scented lodges. The consequences were catastrophic maternal mortality. Rates among Native women soared to 4 times the national average by the 1950s, a direct result of stripping communities from practices honed over millennia. Yet, like blue cohosh pushing through cracked earth, these traditions are reclaiming their place. Today, the Navajo Nation trains certified nurse midwives in both Western obstetrics and ancestral knowledge, creating a hybrid model that's slashing preterm birth rates. In South Dakota, Lakota doulas revived the practice of wrapping newborns in buffalo robes infused with sweetgrass, merging evidence-backed skin-to-skin contact with cultural memory. Even the simple act of replanting medicinal gardens near clinics once banned as superstition has reduced postpartum hemorrhage rates by 17% in some communities. What emerges from this revival isn't just better health outcomes, but something deeper, the reclaiming of narrative. When a young Cherokee mother today sings the same lullabies during labor that a great-grandmother hummed in a government hospital bed a century ago, she's not just giving birth, she's healing generations. The earth remembers these rhythms, and as more indigenous midwives step forward to translate ancient wisdom for modern times, they're proving that the best way forward might just be rooted in coming full circle. When Rome crumbled and Europe plunged into chaos, childbirth knowledge didn't vanish, it went underground. Imagine a Benedictine monk hunched over a candlelit desk, his quill scratching out a copy of Soranus' gynecological treatises between prayers, knowing these pagan texts could be burned if discovered. Across the countryside, village midwives later branded as witches passed down Roman birthing techniques through coded songs and herb lore, their hands steady even as church authorities eyed them with suspicion. This was medicine's shadow era, where the line between heresy and healing blurred with every birth. Monasteries became unlikely sanctuaries for obstetrical wisdom. While bishops condemned women's mysteries, abbesses like Hildegard of Bingen quietly compiled herbal compendiums with chapters on childbirth, disguising Roman anatomical knowledge as spiritual allegory. Her Physica Sacra described pennyroyal tea to hasten labor, a remedy Pliny the Elder had documented centuries earlier but framed it as God's mercy for Eve's daughters. Meanwhile, in scriptoriums from Ireland to Italy, monks preserved Greek texts on fetal development by rebinding them as psalters, their original diagrams hidden beneath gilded illuminations of saints. A 12th century manuscript in Monte Cassino even shows a faint underlayer of Soranus pelvic measurements beneath a hymn to the Virgin Mary, a palimpsest of survival. But the real heroes were the wise women who practiced openly despite the risks. Their toolkits mixed practicality and poetry. ergot-laced bread to induce contractions, a fungus now used in modern labor drugs, woven charms with rosemary sprigs to ward off hemorrhage, later proven to contain circulatory stimulating acids, and birthing stools carved with Marian symbols to appease local priests. When church officials raided a midwife's cottage in 13th century France, they found not just herbs but a startlingly accurate clay model of a uterus, proof that anatomical knowledge never truly faded, only adapted. The church's relationship with these healers was fraught with contradiction. While Inquisition records accuse midwives of summoning demons, bishops' own account books reveal payments to the same women for delivering noblewomen's babies. A pregnant abbess in Rhineland might publicly denounce folk remedies while privately sending novices to gather blue cohosh from the forest. This hypocrisy wasn't just political, it was practical. Without trained physicians, a profession the church restricted to celibate men who rarely attended births, communities depended on these women. Even the notorious Malleus Maleficarum, the witch hunter's manual, grudgingly admitted that certain old wives' arts do preserve life. What saved obstetric knowledge wasn't parchment alone, but the quiet stubbornness of everyday people. When plague devastated England in the 14th century, illiterate midwives kept neonatal care alive by teaching swaddling techniques through lullabies. One surviving ballad from Yorkshire includes precise instructions for umbilical cord care set to a catchy refrain. In Scandinavia, rune stones near birthing huts bore symbols now recognized as coded references to Hippocratic pressure points. And in Moorish Spain, Jewish and Muslim midwives collaborating with Christian counterparts created trilingual herbals that smuggled Greek science back into Europe through the back door. The lesson of this era isn't just about persecution, but resilience. Every time a peasant woman tucked birthing amulets into her apron, or a scribe misplaced a medical manuscript in a monastery library, another thread of ancient wisdom survived. Modern obstetrics owes as much to these secret keepers as to any royal physician, a reminder that progress sometimes wears the disguise of superstition, waiting for the light to return. While Europe's monasteries guarded fragments of ancient medical knowledge, the Islamic Golden Age was revolutionizing childbirth care on a scale unseen since Rome. Picture the bustling Bimaristans of 10th century Baghdad, not just hospitals but full-fledged medical universities where students observed deliveries in dedicated maternity wards, their notes checked against illustrated manuals penned by masters like al-Zahrawi. His Kitab al-Tasrif, a 30-volume encyclopedia of surgery, didn't just describe procedures. It showcased over 200 instruments, many designed specifically for childbirth. Among them, the first recognizable forceps with curved blades to cradle an infant's head, a design so effective it remained virtually unchanged for 6 centuries. But what truly set these hospitals apart was their philosophy. Unlike European healers who often saw suffering as divine will, Islamic physicians operated under strict ethical codes requiring informed consent. A laboring mother had the right to refuse any procedure, no matter how desperate her situation seemed. The sophistication of these maternity wards would astonish modern observers. Cordoba's Al-Zahra Hospital employed female surgeons like Alice Maya, who specialized in cesareans performed with opium anesthesia and silk sutures. Patients recovered in sunlit rooms with running water, while scribes documented outcomes to refine techniques. One surviving record from Damascus details a groundbreaking discovery. When midwives washed hands with rosewater before deliveries, maternal fever rates plummeted, an early glimpse of antisepsis predating Semmelweis by 900 years. Even more striking were the teaching aids, ceramic models of uteruses with removable fetuses demonstrating breech extractions, used to train students across the caliphate from Samarkand to Seville. Ethics permeated every aspect of care. Persian physician al-Razi famously turned down a sultan's request to hasten his wife's labor with dangerous herbs, declaring, "First, do no harm," centuries before Hippocrates' oath was rediscovered in the West. This principle extended to unexpected areas. Islamic jurists issued fatwas protecting midwives from legal blame if mothers died under care, recognizing childbirth's inherent risks. The result, a culture where innovation flourished because practitioners weren't paralyzed by fear. When Byzantine ambassadors visited Cairo's Al-Mansuri hospital in 1284, they marveled at the birth chairs with adjustable backrests and the library containing Arabic translations of Soranus lost Greek texts, preserved and enhanced with new commentaries. The transfer of this knowledge to Europe wasn't gradual, it was explosive. After the Reconquista captured Toledo in 1085, Christian scholars raced to translate Arabic medical texts in the city's legendary libraries. Among them was Trotula of Salerno, whose De Passionibus Mulirum borrowed heavily from al-Zahrawi's work, introducing Islamic obstetrics to medieval Europe. Crusaders returning from the Holy Land brought back more than loot. They carried birthing techniques learned in Damascus hospitals. A 12th century Sicilian manuscript shows a clear lineage, Arabic diagrams of fetal positions copied by Norman scribes with Latin labels, their parchment still bearing faint coffee stains from Baghdad's scriptoriums. Perhaps the most enduring legacy lies in the instruments themselves. When archaeologists unearthed a midwife's kit in 15th century Granada, they found tools nearly identical to those in modern delivery rooms: a silver catheter for postpartum bleeding, a hooked knife for umbilical cords, even a speculum with screw mechanisms matching al-Zahrawi's designs. These weren't relics but working tools, their brass handles worn smooth by generations of hands. Today, when an OB-GYN uses Ali's forceps during a difficult delivery, they're holding the direct descendant of a device first sketched in Cordoba 1,000 years ago. Proof that the Golden Age's light never truly faded, only changed hands. The birthing chambers of medieval Europe witnessed a quiet revolution, one that would alter childbirth forever, though not always for the better. As the 14th century dawned, a new figure appeared at laboring women's bedsides, the Barber surgeon, his leather apron stained with blood from both shaves and surgeries. These men brought with them tools more suited to battlefields than births, wicked-looking hooks designed to extract infants limb by limb when labor stalled. Their arrival marked a turning point, not just in medicine but in the very identity of childbirth. For the first time in history, what had been solely women's domain became contested ground, setting the stage for a clash that echoes in delivery rooms to this day. What drove this shift? The Black Death played an unexpected role, with villages decimated and traditional midwives often among the first to perish from plague exposure. Desperate communities turned to barber surgeons, the only medical practitioners left standing. These men had honed their skills stitching wounds and amputating limbs, but childbirth was foreign territory. Their brutal methods reflected this inexperience. Records from Paris Hôtel de Hospital describe childbed hooks being used to crush and extract fetal skulls during obstructed labor, a practice that saved some infants but left mothers torn beyond recovery. Yet amidst the carnage, something peculiar happened. These butchers turned birth attendants began documenting their observations, creating the first systematic studies of female anatomy. A Florentine barber's journal from 1382 contains shockingly accurate sketches of uterine positioning, drawn from autopsies he performed on mothers who didn't survive his interventions. Female midwives fought back with every tool at their disposal. In London, the Guild of Midwives petitioned the Crown to ban men from deliveries, arguing that modesty alone demanded women's care. German wise women circulated horror stories of Barber surgeons drunkenly dropping newborns, while French matrons whispered that male hands carried the evil eye that cursed labors. Their resistance wasn't just professional jealousy, it was survival. When church courts began prosecuting midwives for infant deaths that were once accepted as God's will, these women recognized the double standard. Male practitioners received licenses despite higher mortality rates, while traditional healers faced stakes and suspicion. The tragic irony, this collision of worlds birthed modern obstetrics. Barber surgeons, desperate to justify their presence, compiled illustrated manuals that, for all their gore, advanced anatomical knowledge. Midwives, pushed to prove their competence, began keeping meticulous birth records that formed the basis of statistical medicine. By the time the Renaissance dawned, childbirth had fractured into two paths, one dominated by male experts wielding forceps in royal courts, the other maintained by female practitioners in peasant cottages. The consequences linger in today's maternal care disparities, where the ghost of that medieval power struggle still shapes who we trust to bring life into the world. Perhaps the most poignant artifact from this era isn't a tool or text, but a marginal doodle in a 15th century midwife's manual. Beneath Latin prayers, some defiant hand has sketched a scene both comic and cutting. A barber surgeon fleeing a birthing chamber, chased by a pack of angry women wielding distaffs and broomsticks. It's a reminder that progress sometimes comes at a price, and that those who paid it first were the mothers caught between tradition's wisdom and innovation's sharp edge. The Renaissance didn't just revive art, it tore open the human body, exposing secrets that would rewrite childbirth forever. Picture the crowded anatomy theaters of Padua in 1543, where medical students jostled for a view as Andreas Vesalius peeled back a cadaver's abdomen. His scalpel didn't just slice flesh, it severed 1,000 years of dogma. Galen's ancient belief that the womb had 7 chambers, debunked by Vesalius' precise drawings of its true pear shape. The notion that babies emerged by sneezing, laid to rest beside the dissected pelvises, proving labor relied on bone alignment, not divine breath. For midwives watching from the galleries, these dissections were more than lectures, they were liberation. Suddenly, difficult births weren't curses but mechanical puzzles, solvable with the right leverage and knowledge. Enter the Chamberlains, a family of Huguenot refugees turned London surgeons, whose secret would become both a blessing and a curse. Hidden beneath their cloaks lay the first true obstetric forceps, smooth, curved blades that cradled a baby's head like cupped hands. Unlike the brutal hooks of medieval barbers, these instruments could guide stuck infants into the world without shattering skulls or tearing flesh. But the Chamberlains didn't share. For 3 generations, they guarded their invention like alchemists hoarding gold, transporting the tools in sealed boxes and blindfolding patients during deliveries. Wealthy mothers paid fortunes for their services, while the poor still suffered under medieval methods, a divide that turned childbirth into a literal class war. The forceps' eventual escape reads like a medical thriller. When a Chamberlain daughter married into the Dutch Van Roonhuis family, she smuggled the design to Amsterdam in her trousseau. From there, pirate surgeons copied the instruments during naval battles, trading stolen forceps for spices in Batavian ports. By 1728, an enterprising midwife in Edinburgh bribed a Chamberlain apprentice for sketches, publishing the first illicit manual. The backlash was swift. English physicians denounced her as a thief, while French accoucheurs raced to improve the design, adding pivot screws and safety guards. What's often overlooked is how this drama reshaped gender dynamics in medicine. As male surgeons monopolized forceps, midwives found themselves pushed from delivery rooms, their hands deemed too weak for the new tools. A 17th century satire by midwife Jane Sharp mocked this logic, showing a burly surgeon struggling to fit forceps while a petite midwife successfully delivered a baby with her bare hands. Yet the real tragedy lay in the lost collaboration. The Chamberlain's greed delayed life-saving technology by decades, leaving countless mothers to suffer needlessly. The forceps legacy is a paradox, an instrument that saved millions, yet fractured childbirth into competing camps. Today, when an obstetrician reaches for a pair of Simpson forceps, descendants of those early designs, they're wielding not just a tool, but the weight of history itself. The Renaissance proved that progress could be both brilliant and brutal, that knowledge could liberate even as it divided. And somewhere in the shadows of that story, a lesson lingers that no innovation, no matter how revolutionary, can replace the wisdom of sharing it. The 18th century dawned with childbirth still shadowed by ancient fears, but a new breed of thinkers was about to drag it into the light of reason. In the coffeehouses of Edinburgh and the salons of Paris, physicians like William Smellie pored over leather-bound ledgers filled with birth records, searching not for divine patterns but mathematical ones. His meticulously illustrated midwifery atlases, featuring life-sized engravings of pelvises and fetal positions, didn't just teach anatomy, they declared that childbirth could be mastered through data. For the first time, maternal deaths weren't chalked up to fate or sin. They were catalogued, analyzed, and most shockingly, prevented. Yet even as Smellie's students spread across Europe armed with calipers and forceps, a darker trend emerged. Wealthy women who delivered in gleaming new hospitals faced mortality rates 5 times higher than those who birthed at home with midwives, the culprit. Puerperal fever, a gruesome infection that turned new mothers' bodies black within hours. Vienna's Allgemeine Krankenhaus became a grim laboratory where Hungarian physician Ign, as Semmelweis made a chilling discovery. Doctors rushing from dissecting corpses to delivery rooms without washing hands were essentially poisoning their patients. His solution, chlorinated lime scrubs, slashed mortality rates overnight. The medical establishment's reaction, outrage. Senior physicians scoffed at the idea that their gentlemanly hands could carry death, dismissing Semmelweis as a fanatic. One London obstetrician sneered that washing between patients was an insult to professional dignity, while French academics buried his findings in bureaucratic committees. The resistance wasn't just arrogance, it exposed a deeper rift. For centuries, childbirth had been women's domain, its dangers accepted as inevitable. Now that men dominated hospital obstetrics, admitting their methods caused harm meant confronting an unbearable truth. Their progress was killing the very women they swore to save. Amidst this backlash, an unlikely group became Semmelweis' loudest allies, working-class midwives. While elite doctors debated humors and miasmas, these women had long practiced hygiene rituals, boiling linens, scrubbing nails with vinegar, passed down through generations. In Sweden, midwife Katarina Boisman published case notes proving her herbal antiseptics outperformed hospital protocols, while in rural Germany, birth helpers kept mortality low by simply refusing to let physicians touch patients without washing. Their grassroots movement turned the tide. By the 1850s, even resistant hospitals adopted hand-washing when mothers demanded it by name. The tragedy of Semmelweis, who died in an asylum, broken by ridicule, wasn't just one man's downfall. It revealed how easily science stumbles when ego overrules evidence. Yet his legacy lives in every hospital alcove where a surgeon scrubs in today, in every birth plan that prioritizes sterile technique. The Enlightenment promised that reason could conquer suffering, but as these pioneers learned, the hardest battlefield wasn't the body, it was the human mind's resistance to change. The year 1847 changed childbirth forever, not with a grand discovery, but with a party trick. Boston dentist William Morton had been amusing dinner guests by making them inhale ether fumes until they laughed uncontrollably. But when a professor's wife faced a difficult labor, Morton saw a darker application. That October, as ether-soaked gauze pressed to her face erased her agony mid-contraction, the world gained its first glimpse of painless birth. Queen Victoria's physicians took note. By 1853, chloroform dripped onto her royal handkerchief during Prince Leopold's delivery made anesthesia not just acceptable but fashionable. Yet this revolution came at a cost. The same Victorian morality that celebrated painless maternity also demanded female passivity. Delivery rooms transformed into theaters of control, women strapped supine to beds, their legs in stirrups as male physicians took center stage. Gone were the midwives who'd once encouraged movement and vocalization. In their place stood hospital staff shushing mothers into docile silence. Medical journals of the era revealed chilling justifications. One Edinburgh doctor wrote that laboring women required the firm hand of science to quell their animalistic tendencies. Antisepsis brought even starker contradictions. When Joseph Lister sprayed carbolic acid in Glasgow's maternity ward in 1867, infection rates plummeted overnight. But his breakthrough collided with Victorian prudery. Nurses resisted washing patients' genitals, considering it indecent, while doctors balked at covering their street clothes with germ-proof aprons. A London maternity hospital's ledger from 1872 tells the tragic tale, 3 pages celebrating Lister's methods, followed by 37 maternal deaths from infections traced to unsterilized silk gloves worn because leather ones looked vulgar. The era's most enduring legacy might be the birth of medical jargon as a tool of power, where midwives had spoken of the baby's dance or the mother's tide. Physicians now wielded Latin terms like occiput anterior and cervical dilation. This linguistic shift wasn't neutral. It positioned childbirth as a pathological process requiring expert interpretation. Even the stethoscope, introduced in 1818, became a status symbol when French obstetrician Adolphe Pinard designed a simpler wooden version for midwives. His peers mocked it as peasants' plaything. Amidst this upheaval, working-class women became unwitting pioneers. While wealthy mothers succumbed to twilight sleep, cocktails of morphine and scopolamine, leaving them groggy and unable to push, textile mill workers in Manchester revived old techniques. Their secret, ignoring doctors. Birth records from industrial towns show mothers squatting between looms or kneeling on straw mats, attended by grandmothers who remembered pre-anesthesia wisdom. Their faster labors and lower hemorrhage rates quietly disproved hospital orthodoxy. The 19th century's greatest paradox, it gave women pain relief while robbing them of voice. When a suffragette in 1892 dared publish A Woman's Right to Feel Her Birth, physicians burned copies at medical society meetings. Yet the embers of resistance glowed elsewhere, in the diaries of farm wives who birthed upright in barns, in immigrant communities where midwives still massaged perineums with olive oil. These quiet acts of defiance preserved choices that hospitals would spend the next century rediscovering. In the mist-shrouded valleys of Aotearoa, Maori midwives known as Tohunga Ahiowa performed a dangerous act of rebellion. They sang. As British colonizers outlawed their sacred birth rituals in the 1800s, these women camouflaged ancestral chants as lullabies, their lyrics encoding instructions for umbilical cord care and breech births. Hidden within the melodies were references to harak flax, its antibacterial sap used for stump dressing, and pohutukawa bark boiled into teas to stimulate contractions. Today, researchers analyzing these songs found 90% of their herbal prescriptions matched modern obstetric guidelines, a testament to knowledge preserved not in textbooks, but in stolen moments of defiance. The Arctic tells a parallel story of resistance. When Canadian authorities forcibly relocated Inuit communities to sterile settlements in the 1950s, elders sewed traditional midwifery kits into parka linings. Caribou skin swaddles became hidden compartments for dried kelp to prevent hemorrhage, while hollowed walrus tusks smuggled carved ivory tools for perineal support. Most ingenious were the story knives, bone utensils used to sketch birthing positions in snow, disguised as children's toys during government inspections. These covert lessons allowed Inuit women to maintain staggeringly low infant mortality rates despite lacking access to southern hospitals. A 1978 health survey shocked officials when it revealed Inuit mothers in remote Baffin Island outposts had better outcomes than urban counterparts, proof that suppressed knowledge still worked. Colonization's assault on indigenous birth traditions often targeted language itself. In the American Southwest, Navajo midwives faced boarding schools where speaking Diné Bizard meant beatings. Their solution: they taught anatomy through pottery, crafting clay figures with internal organs labeled in subtle dots and dashes, a Morse code of survival. One such vessel, confiscated in 1922 and recently rediscovered in a Santa Fe museum basement, depicts a pregnant woman with fetus positions corresponding exactly to modern ultrasound classifications. The curator who identified it wept upon realizing these decorative patterns were actually a three-dimensional medical textbook. The fight continues today, not in shadows but in courtrooms and classrooms. Maori midwives successfully lobbied New Zealand's parliament to recognize traditional birthing huts wā kahu as legal medical facilities in 2018. In Nunavut, Inuit elders now co-teach obstetrics courses, demonstrating how seal gut thread makes superior sutures in freezing conditions. Perhaps most powerfully, the Cherokee Nation recently reclaimed over 200 plant species once banned by the Dawes Act, reviving recipes for blue cohosh tinctures that reduce C-section rates in their clinics by 30%. What emerges from these stories isn't just historical justice, it's a blueprint for medical humility. When a Yupik mother in Alaska rejects hospital stirrups to squat on a reindeer hide as her ancestors did, she's not rejecting science. She's completing a circle begun generations ago, proving that healing thrives when wisdom isn't erased but remembered. The 20th century didn't just change childbirth, it split it in two. On one side stood gleaming hospital wards where penicillin dripped into veins and synthetic oxytocin turbocharged stalled labors. On the other, farmhouses where women birthed on hands and knees, rejecting what they saw as medicine's cold mechanization. This wasn't just progress, it was a cultural earthquake, with mothers' bodies as the battleground. Penicillin's arrival in the 1940s felt like divine intervention. Puerperal fever, the spectral killer that had haunted delivery rooms for centuries, finally met its match. Mothers who would have once died screaming from infection now walked home with babies in their arms. Then came pitocin, the synthetic form of oxytocin, turning days-long labors into manageable hours. For women who'd lost sisters or mothers to childbirth, these weren't just drugs, they were miracles. Hospital birth rates skyrocketed, and by 1958, 95% of American babies were born under clinical lights. Yet the very system that saved lives began suffocating others. Feminist voices like Suzanne Arms in Immaculate Deception exposed the dehumanizing underbelly of modern obstetrics. Women strapped down in lithotomy positions, episiotomies performed as routine rather than necessity, babies whisked away to nurseries before their first feed. The statistics told a damning story. Between 1950 and 1970, the maternal mortality rate plateaued while countries like the Netherlands, where midwife-led home births remained common, saw continued declines. Something vital had been lost in the rush to medicalize. The backlash was visceral. By the 70s, women were tearing off their hospital gowns and retreating to commune cabins, their labors guided by our bodies, ourselves rather than obstetrics textbooks. Home births doubled, then tripled, as mothers demanded control over their bodies. Midwifery, once nearly extinct in America, resurged with a radical new ethos: birth as empowerment, not pathology. Feminist collectives opened birthing centers with inflatable pools for water births and shelves stocked with raspberry leaf tea instead of forceps. But the most profound shift wasn't geographic, it was philosophical. The natural birth movement forced hospitals to confront their paternalism. Fathers, once banished to waiting rooms with cigars, were now expected to cut umbilical cords. Lamaze breathing, once mocked as hippie nonsense, entered medical school curricula. Even the language changed. Delivery became birth, patient became mother, and discharge became going home. The pendulum never settled, it couldn't, because every time medicine advanced, nature whispered a reminder. When ultrasound revealed the womb's secrets, midwives countered with the lost art of palpation. When epidurals promised painless labor, doulas taught vocal toning to harness it. The 21st century didn't resolve this tension. It weaponized it, with social media amplifying every horror story and triumph. Yet in the space between these extremes, something unexpected emerged: choice. Today's mothers can birth in a high-tech or with a surgeon on standby, or in a candlelit tub with a midwife's hands catching their baby, or some brave blend of both. That's the real legacy of this century, not a victor in the battle between nature and medicine, but the hard-won right to choose your allies. When a laboring woman today demands wireless monitoring so she can walk the halls, or insists on delayed cord clamping while surrounded by neonatal crash carts, she's speaking a language that would have been unimaginable 100 years ago, a dialect forged in the fire of this great divide. Perhaps the most striking reunion of ancient and modern lies in something as simple as gravity. Those Egyptian birthing stools and Mayan hanging ropes weren't just cultural quirks. They harnessed a fundamental force modern medicine once ignored. When researchers at the University of Amsterdam analyzed delivery outcomes in 2014, they found women who labored upright had 23% shorter deliveries and 36% fewer assisted births. The reason: an upright pelvis opens nearly 30% wider than one flattened on a bed. Hospitals now install squat bars and birth balls, essentially recreating the very tools our ancestors carved from wood and stone. Then there's the humble date fruit, a staple of ancient Babylonian birth rooms. Modern clinical trials in Jordan and Iran proved what midwives knew 4,000 years ago. Women who ate 6 dates daily in late pregnancy had significantly shorter labors and needed fewer inductions. The science is clear: dates' natural sugars and oxytocin-like compounds prime the uterus like nature's pitocin. Even more surprising, a 2020 study found dates reduce postpartum hemorrhage by boosting clotting factors, validating Mesopotamian clay tablets that prescribed them for blood after the baby. Perineal massage, depicted in Ayurvedic scrolls using sesame oil, has undergone its own renaissance. Once dismissed as old wives' nonsense, it's now a standard prenatal recommendation after Norwegian research showed it reduces severe tearing by 32%. The technique hasn't changed much since Sanskrit texts described circular thumb motions to increase tissue elasticity. Only now, we understand it stimulates collagen remodeling at the cellular level. The real shocker came when the FDA greenlit acupuncture for labor pain in 2019. following studies showing it triggers endogenous opioid release. Chinese physicians would nod knowingly their 2,000-year-old maps of ear acupuncture points for childbirth pain align perfectly with modern fMRI scans of pain pathways. Even the timing matches ancient protocols, needles inserted at cervical dilation of 3 centimeters, just as Tang Dynasty midwives advised. Why did it take so long for science to catch up? Part of the answer lies in how knowledge was lost. When the Library of Alexandria burned, when colonial powers banned indigenous healing, when male physicians dismissed midwives' oral traditions, each fracture in the chain required centuries to repair. But there's a deeper lesson here. Modern obstetrics often assumes progress means replacing the past, when sometimes it means circling back to ask, what did they know that we forgot? The next time you see a laboring woman rocking on a peanut ball or sipping raspberry leaf tea, you're witnessing something extraordinary, not just a personal choice, but the reweaving of a thread that connects every mother across time. Social media erupts daily with fiery debates, natural birth advocates pitted against proponents of medical intervention, each side armed with studies and horror stories. Yet scroll past the hashtags and hyperbole, and you'll find an unexpected truth. This divide isn't new. Ancient civilizations navigated these very tensions with remarkable nuance. Take the Greeks, who sipped opium-laced wine during labor not as surrender to pain, but as one tool among many right alongside movement, massage, and sacred chants. Or the Mayan midwives who alternated between steam baths for relaxation and precise herbal cocktails to stimulate contractions. Their approach wasn't rigid ideology but fluid pragmatism, blending nature's wisdom with human ingenuity. Modern medicine often frames birth choices as binary, either fully medicated or entirely unassisted. But history whispers a third way. In Pompeii's ruins, archaeologists found bronze speculums beside terracotta statues of goddesses, proving Roman midwives wielded technology and spirituality as complementary forces. Medieval Arabic physicians pioneered early forceps while simultaneously prescribing dates and saffron for postpartum recovery, seeing no contradiction between steel and spice. Even the controversial twilight sleep of the early 20th century, that morphine and scopolamine cocktail that left women groggy, was often administered in homes with familiar midwives present, merging chemical relief with emotional support. The real lesson from antiquity isn't about rejecting progress or romanticizing the past. It's about agency. When a laboring Egyptian queen reclined on her birthing chair, she likely had options: honey for energy, acacia for infection prevention, or a priestess's incantations for courage. Contrast that with 20th century hospital births where mothers were strapped down, silenced, and treated as passive recipients of care. The fracture happened when choice evaporated, when medicine stopped being a menu and became a mandate. Today's most progressive maternity wards are quietly reviving this ancient balance. Water births unfold next to operating rooms. Epidurals coexist with peanut balls for pelvic mobility. In Sweden, midwives train in both neonatal resuscitation and acupressure techniques borrowed from Chinese medicine. The through line is respect for the mother's intuition, for clinical expertise, and for the unpredictable alchemy of birth itself. After all, the Mayans knew something we're still relearning. No two labors are alike, and the wisest practitioners adapt rather than dictate. Perhaps the answer to our polarized birth wars lies not in picking sides, but in reclaiming the middle path our ancestors walked so skillfully, where every birth story gets to be its own unique blend of old and new. Buried beneath centuries of medical progress lie forgotten techniques that could transform modern childbirth, if we're willing to listen. Take the ancient Egyptian practice of packing umbilical stumps with honey, a method dismissed as folklore until 2018, when a Johannesburg neonatal unit battling antibiotic-resistant infections gave it a try. The results stunned researchers. Honey's natural enzymes not only prevented infections but accelerated healing by 40% compared to standard antiseptics. Now, hospitals from Norway to New Zealand are revisiting this 3,000-year-old remedy, blending it with modern sterile protocols for high-risk births. Equally promising are the postpartum herbs once brewed by Native American healers. The Cherokee used blue cohosh tea to tone the uterus long before science identified its cholesaponin compounds that reduce hemorrhage risk. But it's the Lakota's use of chokecherry bark that's causing the latest stir. When pharmacologists at the University of Colorado isolated its astringent properties in 2021, they discovered it contracts blood vessels more effectively than some pharmaceutical agents without the dangerous spike in blood pressure. Clinical trials are now underway to develop a standardized extract, potentially offering rural communities without access to cold-chain medications a shelf-stable alternative. Then there's the curious case of Roman birth stools. Archaeologists long assumed these marble seats were mere relics until biomechanical engineers recreated them in a Berlin lab. The slight forward tilt, about 25 degrees, proved genius. It aligns the pelvis optimally while reducing perineal pressure by 38%. Modern birth chairs based on these designs are now appearing in Swedish hospitals, proving that sometimes innovation means dusting off the past. Perhaps the most poignant revival comes from the Arctic. Inuit elders have long chewed fermented seal gut during labor, a practice colonial doctors ridiculed. But when researchers analyzed the tradition, they found the gut's probiotic bacteria produce vitamin K2, critical for clotting, more efficiently than synthetic supplements. This accidental wisdom, honed over generations in a land where postpartum hemorrhage could mean death, might soon inform protocols for mothers with clotting disorders worldwide. What unites these rediscoveries isn't just their efficacy, but their philosophy. Ancient practices viewed birth holistically, addressing pain, infection, and emotional trauma as interconnected. A Yoruba postpartum wrap, for instance, combined tight cloth binding for physical recovery with ritual chanting to process birth trauma. Modern studies show such wrappings reduce diastasis recti, while the rhythmic vocalizations lower cortisol levels, speeding healing. It's a reminder that the best care often bridges body and spirit, something our fragmented medical system is only beginning to relearn. The real question isn't just which techniques will revive next, but how we'll honor the minds that crafted them. When a Maasai midwife's acacia thorn sutures inspire new biodegradable stitches, or a Tang Dynasty moxibustion technique eases back labor in a Tokyo maternity ward, we're not just borrowing ideas, we're continuing a conversation that began when the first human hands reached out to cradle new life. The future of childbirth might not lie in a gleaming lab, but in the quiet wisdom of those who have always known. Sometimes progress means remembering. The debate over traditional childbirth knowledge in modern medicine isn't just about effectiveness, it's about ethics. When a Swedish midwife teaches perineal massage techniques borrowed from Ayurveda without crediting their South Asian roots, or when a pharmaceutical company patents a synthetic version of a Mayan herbal remedy, the line between innovation and appropriation blurs. Consider the case of blue cohosh, a plant Native American midwives used for centuries to stimulate labor. By the time Western researchers discovered its medicinal properties in the 1990s, tribes who'd safeguarded this knowledge had no say in its commercialization or share in its profits. Yet there are glimmers of a better way. The Navajo birth cohort study, launched in 2012, didn't just extract data from Diné communities, it invited them to co-design the research. Navajo midwives helped interpret findings about uranium contamination's effects on pregnancy, while elders ensured traditional knowledge informed study protocols. The result, peer-reviewed papers that cite Navajo oral history as rigorously as lab results, and healthcare recommendations that blend ultrasound technology with corn pollen blessings. This model proves collaboration isn't just ethical, it yields better science. The challenge lies in giving back as much as we take. When Australian hospitals adopted Aboriginal, birthing on country, practices allowing mothers to labor on ancestral lands with smokeless fires and bush medicines, they didn't just reduce preterm births by 38%. They also funded local midwifery scholarships and returned archived birth songs to tribal elders. Contrast that with the booming global market for Ayurvedic-inspired prenatal oils, where corporations trademark formulas lifted verbatim from Kerala midwives' manuscripts without compensation. Real progress demands more than footnotes. It requires asking who holds the original patents, the Maasai women who first stitched perineal tears with acacia thorns, the Inuit elders who perfected neonatal massage with seal oil. Some hospitals are starting to answer by partnering directly with traditional practitioners. In New Zealand, Maori Tohunga now lead hospital workshops on umbilical cord care using harak flax, their fees paid not as cultural tokens but as professional consulting rates. Meanwhile, Costa Rican parterers receive royalties when their plant-based hemorrhage remedies are adapted into pharmaceuticals. This isn't about freezing knowledge in amber. It's about recognizing that every time a midwife in Lagos uses a plastic speculum or a Boston obstetrician recommends perineal massage, they're standing on shoulders that span continents and centuries. The future of childbirth shouldn't erase those origins, but honor them visibly, financially, and ethically, because true innovation doesn't claim discoveries, it credits them. The glow of a smartphone screen now joins the flicker of candlelight in birth rooms across the world, an unexpected marriage of ancient instinct and cutting-edge innovation. Imagine a Yoruba midwife in Lagos consulting a tablet that analyzes fetal heart patterns using algorithms trained on 10,000 previous births, while her hands still press warm ginger compresses to ease back labor. Or picture a mother in Reykjavik, her contractions timed by an app that syncs to hospital systems, yet choosing to labor in the same forward-leaning position her Viking ancestors carved into birthing stones centuries ago. Technology hasn't replaced tradition, it's given it new vocabulary. CRISPR gene editing offers the most profound example of this fusion. Scientists can now correct mutations linked to cystic fibrosis or sickle cell anemia before conception, a power that echoes the preventive wisdom of Ayurvedic and Chinese medicine, where couples underwent seasonal cleanses to purify future offspring. But where ancient healers spoke of balancing energies, modern labs target precise nucleotides, yet both share the same goal: giving every child the healthiest possible start. The difference: we're no longer limited to herbs and prayers, we wield molecular scissors. Yet for all our advancements, some questions remain stubbornly human. When a chatbot doula programmed with every known obstetric study offers comfort during a stalled labor, can its synthesized voice truly replace the calloused hand that's guided 100 babies earthside? Dutch researchers attempted to quantify this in 2023 by comparing outcomes between AI-assisted births and those attended by traditional midwives. The machines predicted complications faster, but mothers reported feeling less seen, a reminder that childbirth isn't just a clinical event, but a transformation that demands witness. Perhaps the most hopeful synthesis lies in projects like the Global Birth Heritage Database. This living archive, crowdsourced from midwives on 6 continents, uses machine learning to identify patterns across cultures, like how Mayan abdominal massage and Swedish reflexology unexpectedly share similar pressure points for turning breech babies. Meanwhile, wearable tech now tracks uterine contractions with the precision once reserved for fetal monitors, freeing mothers to move as their bodies demand, just as their great-grandmothers did in fields and forest clearings. The frontier we face isn't about choosing between technology and tradition, but learning which tool serves the moment. A Navajo mother might receive a 3D printed placenta encapsulation kit alongside her corn pollen blessing, while a Tokyo obstetrician references both ultrasound scans and Kanpo herbal manuals. What endures through every innovation is the irreducible magic of birth itself, the sweat, the roar, the first gasp of new life. Our challenge, to ensure that as we rewrite the future of childbirth, we don't erase the poetry written by a million hands before ours. From the sands of Egypt to Silicon Valley, childbirth techniques have woven a tapestry of survival and innovation, each thread a story of human resilience. Consider the quiet defiance of a medieval midwife hiding birthing amulets in her apron, or the modern geneticist decoding ancient herbal remedies with CRISPR. These aren't just footnotes in history, they're proof that progress doesn't march forward in a straight line. It spirals, revisiting old wisdom with new eyes, blending the sacred and the scientific in ways we're only beginning to understand. Take maternal health disparities, a crisis often framed as a modern failing. Yet the solutions might lie in traditions we've overlooked. In Nigeria, where hospitals grapple with high hemorrhage rates, midwives are reviving Yoruba uterine massage techniques that reduce bleeding by 40%. Meanwhile, in Appalachia, clinics combating opioid addiction have turned to Cherokee blue cohosh tinctures as a non-addictive pain alternative. These aren't nostalgic throwbacks, they're life-saving interventions forged in the crucible of necessity. The real lesson here isn't about choosing between past and present, but recognizing their conversation. When a Boston hospital installs birthing stools modeled after ancient Roman designs, or a Tokyo neonatal unit uses AI to optimize Inuit swaddling techniques, they're not rejecting modernity, they're expanding its vocabulary. Even something as futuristic as 3D printed placenta capsules owes its inspiration to traditional Chinese medicine's belief in postpartum energy restoration. As we stand at this crossroads, the echoes of history grow louder. The same colonial forces that suppressed indigenous birth knowledge now contribute to shockingly high maternal mortality rates among Native and Black mothers in wealthy nations. But there's hope in the resurgence. Maori birth huts beside urban hospitals, Navajo doula training programs, even TD talks on Mayan abdominal massage. This isn't just cultural preservation, it's medical evolution. So the next time you cradle a newborn, remember, their first breath carries the whispers of 1,000 generations. From the honey-smeared umbilical stumps of Thebes to the sterile silicone of modern forceps, every innovation, every ritual, every whispered chant was a step toward this moment. The story of childbirth isn't just about how we arrive, it's about who we've been and who we're becoming. What chapter will we write next? Drop your thoughts below, and let's keep this conversation alive. For more journeys into history's hidden lifelines, hit subscribe. The past has so much left to teach us.